Okay, hello. Nice to see everyone. Piero asked me to talk about 30 years of practice in 20 minutes. I'm not going to do it, but my name is Amy Franceschini, and I'm a founder and part of a group called Futurefarmers, and we tried to map ourselves a few years ago, the people, projects, and places where we've worked. We started as a design studio in San Francisco in 1994. Did a lot of work on kind of tools for sociability on the internet, but we wanted to figure out a way to get people talking to each other in real life, not just on the internet. So I won't talk about our past as a design studio, but we still weave in and out of kind of corporate clients, nonprofits. Maybe we can talk about it later. We ran an artist in residency program for 20 years, which has built an international basis of collaborators that we still work with. So this is us. In 2007, we were nominated for an award at the Museum of Modern Art, and we launched a program called Victory Gardens, pulling from the historic World War I and II program. Out of that, we asked the museum if we could do something in the real world, whatever that is, rather than a museum. So we asked if we could reinstate a victory garden in front of City Hall to demonstrate how we could grow food in our cities and change policy to support that. So in short, we did, and historical precedent, as you'll see in our work, is very important. So the city of San Francisco couldn't imagine an urban agricultural program, but I found these images in the library and I printed them huge, and I went to our president of board of supervisors in his office and I tried to give them to him, but he doesn't accept gifts, and I was like, look, we had a demonstration garden in 1941, we had 500 plots of gardens in Golden Gate Park, 43% of our food was being grown in backyards and parks while farmers were sent off to war. When have we shifted participation that much in the world? It was so inspiring. So they said, why don't we have a victory garden? So now we use historical precedent when we work with politicians a lot. Our big hero in the city hall was Matt Gonzalez. Maybe some of you remember him. He ran for mayor against Gavin Newsom, lost, but he used to have art openings in City Hall, and this was one of the art openings where a graffiti artist wrote, "Smash the state." And I like to show this in a European context because people don't think Americans are self-reflexive. Sort of silly, but it was interesting for a politician to have art openings in his office because a lot of young artists would never go inside City Hall. We were of like the smash the state era. And so people were going in the City Hall, and he was really like, this is your house. This is where decisions are made. Let's participate. Let's not, agitate. So for me, I was a younger artist, and this was very inspiring, and I thought, yeah, let's collaborate with the city. Gavin Newsom used our garden as this nice publicity stunt to run for governor. So we got to keep this garden for many more months. It got a lot of press. What it did is it brought all the existing urban gardens together and formed an urban agricultural alliance. And together we wrote policy to keep the funding of these gardens and more gardens in San Francisco, which still exists. This project got international press. Michelle Obama planted a victory garden. The New York Times wrote about it, and Futurefarmers started to be invited all over the world to make urban gardens, which is not what we set out to do. The city of Philadelphia called us to imagine Philadelphia as the greenest city in 2015. And as Californians, we were like, why are we being invited to Philadelphia to do this? We were also struck by urban blight, abandoned buildings, and we proposed to put windmills on top of the abandoned buildings to produce electricity in one of the windier cities. So the mayor, Nutter, at the time, invited us to do this. We took a little side trip. Someone said, oh, there's this great abandoned building on the corner. I know the owner. And we went there, and there was this statue of Don Quixote. And we're like, how perfect. So it really does exist. There's the Don Quixote monument, and we got permission to put a windmill through this building and run a temporary soil kitchen, which was a facility to test people's soil to make sure it was not contaminated. We cleaned the building out of it. We worked with a local farm that had transitioned a contaminated plot into healthy soil and served soup from that plot. And we offered services with the EPA to test soil for cadmium and lead. And if soil was healthy, people could come back in and work with soil scientists from UPenn. One of the great soil scientists that helped us is now at Stanford, Jane Willingring, if anyone knows her, amazing woman. And then if your soil was contaminated, the EPA would go to your home and do deeper tests. So we collected all the soil in the window, and neighbors would come by and be like, what is this soil kitchen? And word got out that this was happening, and people started to self-organize. Workshops, talks about how to make these soil kitchens all over Philadelphia. And the EPA took this on as a project which is now called Soil Cafe. So they go around to different cities with contaminated soil. From these projects, we were invited to Norway, which is like, okay, what are we gonna do in Norway? And we did a 10-year project called Flatbread Society. We were invited to do a permanent public artwork in the redevelopment of Oslo. This was a very contentious project, too complicated to go into, and we were a bit like, not sure if we want to participate, but maybe if we do something on the periphery that's not going to be developed for 20 years, we can get away with doing something different. We proposed to make a farm, and the city thought we were crazy. They said, no one wants to farm here. All the urbanites just came from rural areas. They don't even want to bend over to do work. And so we did our historical precedent. We went to the library and found that actually the king had a farm here 100 years prior that fed the whole King's Court and all the boat builders in this harbor. So the city said, okay, try it. We don't think it'll work. So we put out a call in many languages, and 4,000 people signed up to temporarily garden here. And our idea was, it's not very beautiful, it's not glamorous, but we just thought, let's let people occupy this site and see if there's a movement, and there was. There was too many people that signed up, so the city gave plots in different gardens around the city, and it kind of kick-started an urban gardening movement. Instead of being Futurefarmers, we started a working group called Flatbread Society as a way to bring different cultures together around flatbread. Norwegians eat it, but in Oslo, Pakistani people are baking it, and Iranian, Iraqi, Indian. And so we thought of it as a currency that could kind of move through this project. We based ourselves temporarily on the site and built an oven, and we called it a bakehouse, which is a traditional form in Norway. Everybody could come build it. People decided to come in all shapes and forms to use it. There were 3 different ovens. I think I got a picture there. We made 3 different ovens, and all kinds of people came. Fisher people, young immigrants came, global climate change scientists came after their conferences, and people were like, we need this to be a permanent feature of this waterfront. We liked the idea of, as a temporary space, the bakehouse was at the site we wanted to transform, but we wanted a bigger audience in the bigger city to be involved. So we made this canoe oven, and we would row around the fjord and come out and talk to people, interview them to see, would you come here, what would you want? And we streamed those conversations onto the internet. And that kickstarted all kinds of interest. Farmers wanted to plant seeds there. This is a farmer we worked with who wanted to reintroduce old grains, which were lost in many different places. And activists wanted to come and use this as a stage to defend small-scale farmers, to defend the right to save seeds, and media started to go spin out of control. And we said, okay, let's meet and think together, how can we make this a farm? We gathered and had community meetings, we voted on things, and the city said, go for it, you can have a farm. But there was no soil. It's a rock where we were. So we hand wrote 100 postcards to local farmers around, and we said, will you bring a significant amount of soil that we can place on this site and start an urban farm? So we had this soil procession. We met at the edge of the city, and all the farmers brought their trucks. The king gave us 9 tons of soil. People brought wheelbarrows, people brought chickens and donkeys. And we proceeded to the site, and we made this huge flatbread, cloth of flatbread. And we asked everyone to put one little handful from each farm and mix the soils into a new culture. And the people named this culture Losetter, which means a common in the city. And this was a common space in this new development. We co-wrote a declaration of land use to claim this as a cultural institution among the Munch Museum, the National Opera, and the National Library, which was moving down. And this would be dedicated to art and agriculture in perpetuity. So this was kind of a momentous time. The land has developed in many different ways. This was in like 2012. It was the allotment gardens that started. There's now a city farmer. And then people just started showing up, like beekeepers. A farmer drove by and he said, "You're gonna need a plow. I'll bring my cat and my horses." The beekeepers found out it was an art project and they started to make goth beekeeping club. It just kind of went beyond our dreams. And then we knew we needed a permanent space, so we built this bakehouse, permanent space that's fashioned after an old 1895 rescue boat. And it's a meeting place and a bakehouse, but it's used for all kinds of things. If you've watched The Beforeigners on HBO, it was a site for people that are sensitive to technology. What Futurefarmers does is we kind of like to secretly reroute art funding to farmers. So we rerouted a lot of our individual funding to hire a permanent farmer here, and we partnered with the Norwegian Farmers Union to do this. So every 2 years, a farmer is hired. We're in our last year of Kari. And they each bring a different flavor to the project. So they have to be very social, so it's a very particular kind of person. Our project was used to influence the urban strategy for, the Norwegian strategy for urban agriculture. So many cities now have city farmers and have opened up spaces for farming. You can visit it. It's open 24 hours a day. It's always changing. There's concerts, there's festivals, there's free food every Wednesday. There's a bakers union. It goes on, and it's really wonderful. 2 summers ago was the 10-year anniversary. We brought everyone together to rethink the next 10 years. And so there it is in another iteration. To lead this project, we sailed away. We took the grains we grew with these farmers on a reverse migration of their domestication on this boat, which is the boat we fashioned the bakehouse after. This is the 1895 rescue boat. And we went from Oslo all the way to actually Jerusalem, first by boat and then by land and then by various means. And we would collect seeds from farmers that these old grains that were like lost in the 1800s and hadn't been industrialized and were now being brought back into production. And it's very special, this process, because these seeds hold genetic information that's been selected out in modern varieties. And so they need to come out of the gene banks, adapt, and then go back to the gene banks. And no one can afford to do this. These are just enthusiast farmers. So we were collecting them, sharing them, presenting them in museums, trying to create discourse around this. We went on land to Spain, we went to Sharjah to exhibitions, we ran a radio station to broadcast all the farmer interviews. We sent messages via SSTV. And I think I'm going to skip just to show the more recent project that kind of was an outcome of this. So we met a lot of people on this journey, and we met this group of farmers in Belgium that were amazing, and they kept saying, like, we want to deliver food by boat. You know, we drive our food every 2 times a week in a van, and we're in traffic, and we don't have time to do our taxes. And if we had a boat, we could do our taxes on the boat. We could have debates on the boat. So we got permission to build this funny canal boat. And the idea was really to think about how it could be a new agrarian commons. Like, how could this be used by lots of people? To bring food 2 times a week, but then how could it create an extension from the canal into the city? Could it be a temporary farmer's market, a bakery? We tried to bring together a lot of unconventional partners to fund it and to keep it going. We declared some urgencies that it would address. And we looked at historical precedent. So the canal in Brussels used to be full of boats delivering food, carrying horses, sheep, coal. And this helped convince the Port of Brussels that small vessels should exist. We put this reed roof on because it's an old tradition and partners wanted to show off this old tradition of reed. The interior was a beautiful space and it was very strange in the harbor, so we became kind of icons to all the harbor masters immediately, like, what's this funny thing? We successfully delivered and reorganized logistics to deliver food of 12 farmers twice a week to the center of Brussels, and then bike messengers would carry these to stores and co-ops. We even got eggs uncracked. And then while it was in the city, this was parked in front of what's now the new Pompidou Center, and the Pompidou helped us get permissions to be here. We would hold debates with politicians to see how this could be a bigger, ongoing project. We had film screenings, we had jam sessions, pirate radio, and to finalize our first season, we delivered apples that fell during a hailstorm. No one knew what to do with all these apples. So we brought them into the city and we processed them through the city hand to hand to a place where we made juice and we gave free juice away. This again got a lot of press and has basically received support to go on, or to be determined what is the next boat, because this was a temporary boat, more like a flagship hello. And now it floats around and is looking for its next port of entry. How much time are we? I lost my track. I think I'm finished, actually. So I'm going to finish with that, and thank you.
Can you say a little more about how you started? Because not many people have the idea of starting something that borders on design, social science, conceptual art, and so on.
Okay, so I grew up in the San Joaquin Valley, and my father was a large-scale farmer, industrial farmer, and he owned a pesticide company. And I was very sick as a child. My mother was studying Rudolf Steiner, and they were kind of clashing about why I might be sick. Long story short, they divorced, and I spent time between my father's farms and my mother, who became an activist trying to transition conventional farms into organic farms. And somehow I wanted, in my art practice, to keep a space where these two ideologies could meet. I mean, I saw both of them. My dad thought he was growing food for the world, and my mom wanted to grow healthy food for children. And the spaces that we've created online were also these social spaces where we would try to create spaces of debate where people who may not talk start to talk. And I think that's a starting point. And in Oslo, what we tried to do is create a space where difference is the norm, like that different kinds of people can come together, there's no prejudgments, and kind of create strange places that people don't understand. Like, what's going on? And by asking what's going on, you get into a conversation with someone that you maybe would never get into. And the design studio funded our art projects for a long time. And for the last years, we've been lucky to have grants, and Europe has much better subsidies than here, so we've worked a lot in Europe.
And so now that you have credibility, what's your dream project? If you could get the funding the ideal funding, what would be your dream project?
I would start in not art school. I don't know if you know, but all art schools in the Bay Area, except wonderful Stanford, which is so small though, have closed. And I think we're in this beautiful transition of what art education can be. And I think art has become so many different things than it was. It's become activism, it's become a lot of things. And I would love to create an interdisciplinary place-based school. I don't exactly know what it would be yet, but California, for sure.
Any questions?
I was wondering, when you start a project, how much do you predetermine what the path is going to be, and how much space do you leave for improvising or changing or morphing the project?
You know, I think we leave it really open, but I think we actually don't. I think, for instance, the bakehouse. We encountered a bakehouse in the north, in a small village, and we said, oh, it would be great if we could build a bakehouse. And somehow that imaginary lived among a lot of people we encountered in Norway. And so I think we had a rough idea of, yes, we want to make a bakehouse, but we didn't know the form or the function of it in the city. And so I think that's where having a really strong imaginary from the start galvanizes people around an image, and then to make that image together is very empowering. So we held a lot of meetings to talk to different people and to think about even how does it function, because we were in a public space that couldn't have any economy. So what's an alternative economy that can run in this space? So we worked with alternative bankers and hippies and like all kinds of people to think, how do we do this? I think we think of ourselves as making frameworks, pretty strong frameworks that people can self-organize in. And when our projects are successful, they carry on without us. And like we go back to Oslo now and nobody knows who we are. And it's great. It's like, yay.
Have you ever had situations where committees and groups could not agree on a direction? And then how did you resolve that?
It's so funny because I live in an artist co-op, the oldest one in the United States, and we can't agree on things. But somehow I think art, when we meet and have these discussions, we're in the strangest places, like in the Soil Kitchen, you're in this old abandoned building with a windmill that's, once in a while the whole building goes because we connected the windmill to gears inside the building that would illuminate a small light. And it kind of like destabilizes people. And I actually think the destabilization creates a common, like we're all in this weird space together, and it's sort of like magic. The bakehouse also, people would come and be like, this weird oven, I'm a baker, but I've never seen 3 ovens in one form, and by that kind of discomfort, they're more open.
Okay, another question here. Do you mind if Michael starts setting up his computer?
Yes, please do.
Just curious, is there anything local that we can kind of be involved or becoming more interested? Or do you also use Stanford Farm as an example of something similar?
I hope so. We've had a lot of visits with Stanford Museum lately, and we're working on a project in Marin County right now, building a suite of boats for the king tide, for the next king tide. So that's a 3-year project, but next year we'll launch a suite of kind of sit on top of kayaks.
And if people want more information, where?
Futurefarmers.com. You can email through there. Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.